Good day, chess world. So, we are continuing our wonderful exploration on the series Logical Chess Move by Move. And we have in this one now, game 30, Capablanca against Villejas. My apologies for the Spanish people for my pronunciation or enunciation. But this game was played in 1914 in Buenos Aires. And it's a spectacular demonstration of Capablanca's wonderful endgame technique. And what you're going to learn in this game is you're going to see how we use an outside pawn majority to generate a pass pawn, use that pass pawn as a tool to tie down the opponent's pieces. And then how do you convert with that pass pawn? That's the big one you're going to see in this one. For those of you who have signed up, other ones can sign up in the notes below as well. I'll email you all the notes to the different games that then can help you to improve your knowledge base and understanding. So today's session, let's jump right into it, where it starts with the Queen's Pawn. And the Queen's Pawn game for Capablanca in the early parts of his career, he was very much influenced by the other players in America, for example, Marshall, Pillsbury. These players were famous for the Queen's Pawn game and the more complex fight. Later, he moved into a more King Pawn game. But Capablanca was a great natural talent of chess and could truly play any structures. But a big theme to learn from him is that he focused on the basics of development early on. So here he plays knight f3, just a flexible move. It does not change anything. There's still a lot of different openings that could come. He could play a Queen's Gambit. He could play the London system. He could play a Tora attack. There's a great deal of options. So it's very much a flexible move. And now he plays e3. And this we have seen in the early parts. Go through some of those early games in the series where this is the Collie. And we'll be introduced to, this one is called the Collie-Zukertort variation, named after Zukertort, who played for the first World Championship against Steinitz. So now we get pawn to c6. I wouldn't say it's a great move because it's a little bit passive. You can see Black had an intention of how to set themselves up. They wanted to play what we call a Slav setup, where they put the pawns on the light squares in a triangle formation. But here, maybe he could play a little bit more aggressively, but nothing against this. Bishop d3. We have the beginning of the Collie, bishop g4, and now he plays c4. Very good move from Capablanca, showing good understanding. The idea is now he changes into almost certainly a Queen's Gambit from here, but he's looking at the potential idea of playing Queen b3 and targeting b7 in this position. So a very nice little move. Then we get pawn e6, and now he plays this interesting knight b to d2. The idea from Capablanca is we've seen in earlier games some Queen's Pawn games where it is a Slav structure like this with a triangle, and Black's intention a lot of the time is to take out of the center and then be able to play through the middle with e5. Now that's something far down the line, and Capablanca already has decided he is prepared to take back with his knight if need be, but also he just wants to make sure that his queen is not tied down to defending. So that's why he plays knight bd2 in this case. So knight bd7, castles, gets the development done, bishop e7, and now Capablanca plays this move queen c2. Again, a little bit passive. Capablanca was not a great opening theoretician, but I certainly think he would have benefited by playing pawn to b3 first and solving the problem of his dark squared bishop. But instead, Capablanca now deals with this interesting moment. And the point that we can look closely is his opponent now plays bishop h5. Why? Because his opponent would like to trade off this bishop because of the pressure that it's generating. And let's just unpack. Why did he not castle? What would happen if he castled? And what he didn't enjoy here is the potential that knight e5 could come along, the bishop would return back to h5, and now he didn't like this active placement of the piece. But hold on, why couldn't he just take with a knight on this square? What would happen in this case? Well, of course, pawn takes, and then the bishop and queen would win a pawn on h7. So that is a very clever idea from Capablanca, so that he was preparing to gain control for the strong outpost square in e5. And then be able to use that as a little tactic. So his opponent leaves the king in the middle for a short amount of time. Nothing dangerous here. Why? Because the center is not open. And if the center is closed, then very importantly, you can leave the king for a little bit of time in the middle. So pawn to b3, very nice from Capablanca. He simply solves the problem of development. He says, I need to get my bishop in the game. Let's get playing. So now we get bishop to g6, bishop to b2, and then in simple terms, the opponent trades off, queen takes. And this moment is really valuable for you in your games to just try and get an understanding. If you are happy to trade, try to get your opponent to trade for you. That's very important because in this moment here, the opponent has played bishop g6. And let's think, well, why did Capablanca not play bishop takes g6? Well, his thinking was if bishop takes, the pawn would take back, h takes g6, and now this rook is very active on this file. Is it dangerous? Not at all. But Capablanca didn't like the look of that rook potentially creating pressure there, so he simply said, if I'm happy to trade, let my opponent do it for me. And I think that's valuable in your games, because now if we see, the bishops do come off the board, but Capablanca's completed his development. So that little bit of gain of time, if you will, is advantageous. So now black does the correct thing. They castle because Capablanca's plan is what? If you were playing white here, what would you do with the white pieces? How would you conduct yourself? Opening is finished. Now we are entering a middle game. What do we think we're going to do? What sort of plan? Pause the video. Write down some of your ideas. This is really instructive. And then try and write down, if you were playing white, how would you go ahead? What would you do? Now, the big plan that needs to be played here is white pushing through the middle with e4. But it's important to do the timing. e4 at the right time. Why? Because black does not have the same flexibility. Black cannot play e5 because white has got the pawn, the knight, and the bishop guarding that square. So white is going to seize the center, but white can do it when it benefits them. And that's important. If you have the better of the game, and here white is that little bit better. Why? Why can I say white is better here? Well, white has more space. If you look, all of the pieces for white, they are comfortable. They're not in each other's way. Also, if we do that little count of the center, if we just look at control, white controls e5 so much, he could put a piece on it. e4 now is a 50-50 fight. Black has two attacking for white. d4 is occupied by whites and protected very strongly, and d5 is protected. So we could say, in terms of black's possession, we would turn out to say d5 belongs to black, white has d4, and white has e5. That's important. White can use that. And that is the difference maker, because now, in this situation, white is going to take over e4. And that little bit extra space doesn't give a huge advantage to white. It just makes the position easier to play. So white uses this opportunity, gets a rook onto e1. Why the a rook? Why are we choosing that rook? Why not the f rook? My tip to you is when you have to make a decision on which rook to move if you're going to play to a certain square, ask yourself, what job will the rook do that I don't move? And that's where Capablanca decides this rook on f1 will be stationed to protect the king, and at the same time in future, maybe he's going to push f4. But he says, instead of leaving a rook over there in the queenside corner, let's concentrate and just leave it here to protect the king. So the opponent plays queen c7, he's preparing to play c5, and here Capablanca says, now's the time to strike. And this is very clever. He first placed the rook on this file before he opened it up. Black does not have that luxury. It's not the same thing. Now he's changing that center. And that's, by the way, technically why we would call the center semi-closed, because there is still the possibility both sides could play through the middle. When we talk of a completely closed center, there's no pawn pushes through the middle. So pawn to e4, and now he takes. By the way, if he did not take, certainly white would be able to play pawn to e5, and white would then gain a big space advantage, and that would be what we call a closed center because no one's playing through the middle then. So pawn takes, knight, now we get knight takes, knight captures back, and then Capablanca shows us a cool move. How would you capture back? What would you do? Because we can take with the queen, the rook, while he takes with the rook. And this is a very clever move at this stage because he's setting up the possibility to double on the semi-open file. And we're going to unpack why this is actually quite a clever theme and how this is going to be quite useful. So the opponent now plays bishop f6, starting to look to put a pin here. Notice also how the center changes. We would now call the center semi-open, since in simple terms, there's a semi-open file for white, semi-open file for black in this case. So, okay. So bishop f6, a little tactical threat is what? We always need to look carefully the moment your opponent moves. You need to stop and ask what and why. Why did they play there? What does it do? So if we gave black the move, what would they do with that move? Oh, knight c5. A clever little positional theme, because then it forks the queen and the rook and uses this pin. Now, it doesn't win material, but it does change the position for black's benefit. Why? Because then white would have to double these pawns to stop losing material, and in this more open position, the bishop would take, and I think the bishop is a slightly better minor piece here than the knight. So he says, no, thank you, I'm playing queen e3. And he puts the queen and rook on the semi-open file. The queen looks at c5. So now his opponent plays pawn to c5. And again, so instructive from Capablanca. What should we do here? How should we continue? And what he does is he jumps straight into the center with this nice move. Now, the idea of this is very good. This is a wonderful outpost square for the knight. If the opponent decides that they're going to trade, we, of course, take back with a pawn. And now we get this nice space advantage on the king side with the possibility to generate real threats with the rook coming in, f4, f5. I wouldn't say it all black is losing, but it's a bit uncomfortable. So black decides they're going to play pawn takes d4. And this is based on a little miscalculation in this position. And Capablanca was so sharp and so strong with these big moments. I want you to think here. If you're playing here with the white pieces, what are you going to do? How are you going to handle this? This is a big moment. Very, very instructive because they've just taken. And I want you to look at this idea that when we talk of captures, we can capture on d4 with the bishop. And we've got another capture, knight takes d7. But I mean, he just takes our queen. What does that do? We're just losing our queen. That's preposterous. Well, okay. Do we have a check after that? Well, yes, we do. We have knight takes on f6 check. Okay, if the opponent takes back with a pawn, oh, check. Oh my goodness, king here, bishop takes, checkmate. A stunning, brilliant idea. This is actually called Pillsbury's mate, we're about to see. Knight takes d7. Now, the opponent is very, very smart. And let's unpack. If the pawn captures on d4, knight captures on f6 check, pawn takes, rook g4 check, incredible. Bishop takes here, mate. Spectacular in this position. So this is very, very impressive as an idea. Let's also just have a look after check. If white decided to play king h8, then we have this incredible move of rook to h4, threatening an Arabian mate. And once again, if pawn takes f6, bishop takes f6, we're going to see the same mate. What are they doing after h6? Well, this is incredible. Rook takes h6, pawn takes, and then the knight will simply move out the way with a discovered check, leaving him up two pieces for a rook. What a combination from Capablanca. Absolutely spectacular. So do not underestimate. Capablanca is famous for his endgame skills, but he was still a wonderful tactician. So in this moment, his opponent sees the danger and says, no, I'm going to play queen takes d7. So we get bishop takes d4, the bishop takes back, rook takes d4. Queen to c7. Okay, who's better, who's worse? What do we think is going on? I mean, there's a great deal of trades. Well, there's one game in town here, and that is this file, because we have 2 rooks and a queen each, and rooks love open files. The happy place for rooks, remember, is the 7th rank. And this is a big theme from Capablanca. He is better, much better here, because of his dominance of the rooks. So rook fd1, and this is a big deal because now the opponent, if he tries to compete, he plays rook f to d8. And Capablanca plays such a simple, nice move in this case to say, but you can't keep up the competition on the file. He plays this move b4. What a wonderful move. Now let's unpack here. First and foremost, Capablanca's opponent had to play a rook to d8 because the threat was the rook invading to the 7th, and that would be crushing. That cannot happen. So in this case, rook to d8 is a spectacular theme in this one because now the rook fights from a defensive point of view for black. And all he does is he pushes b4 because white is better here because he has the outside majority. And this is a big theme in chess. If we deleted all of the pieces, they're all gone, white can generate an outside pass pawn and go on to win this game. So because of that, if we look, black would generate what we call an inside pass pawn. But that one is not as dangerous because look how close it is to the king. So that small little advantage can be everything because now there is that chance for white to generate that outside pawn. If we had a lot more pieces on the board and black could get their pawn rolling through the middle, that extra space with more pieces is very valuable. But now, if we notice with less pieces on the board, just trying to get this pawn to advance is a challenge. And if he doesn't get the pawn to advance, he has no compensation for this outside pass pawn. And again, we see the theme from Capablanca. If you're happy to trade, can you get the opponent to trade for your benefit? So the rook takes on d4, queen takes d4. Naturally, he takes with the queen. Why? To stop the opponent competing on the file. That's a big one. I said to you, this is the only game in town. That file is what matters. Whoever controls that file has the better of the game in this case. And that's a big deal because it's the only open file. So, very important, black plays b6. Not the best of moves. Why? Try not to push pawns where you stand weaker. And that's instructive here, because by pushing b6, he thinks, I'm making it harder for the pawn to push. No. In this position, this pawn on c4 is a potential pass pawn. It's not a pass pawn. When he plays b6, now it can become a pass pawn. When we say pass pawn, we mean a pawn that is not opposed by any other pawn. In other words, it can just keep on rolling. There's no pawns in the way. If pieces are in the way, that's a different story. It's still a pass pawn. We only focus, if you imagine, if you delete all the pieces, that is a pass pawn coming up. So Capablanca plays this nice little move g3. Why? Because he doesn't want to in future get caught with some sort of back rank trick. That's a nice little tip in your games. When the pawns are sitting flat like this, and there's pieces fighting for files, give your king a little bit of air, a little bit of luft. And that's what he does. His king can always move out in this case. So the opponent plays rook c8. He plays rook to c1. The opponent now plays rook d8. Oh, but I thought this was the only game in town. Why did he give up the file? Because now he has the ability to make the pass pawn. Watch carefully. The queen gets out of the way. I would say queen e4 is slightly better. Why? Because if you can put your queen in the center, your queen will be at its best. So the king goes to f8, and now c5. He makes a pass pawn. Now there are no pawns blocking its advance. Very important, black must capture. Why? Because if they push, allow white to push c6 and then b5, that's then a protected pass pawn. Go back, look at the notes, and also go back to the earlier videos. You'll see some wonderful games demonstrating the power of the protected pass pawn when it's so close to promotion. So pawn takes c5. Now he plays a really smart little move, queen e4. He keeps this pin and he attacks on h7. And this is a great move. This is typical of Capablanca. Just when we thought, oh, we know what he's going to do. He's going to take back with a pawn. No, no, no. He inserts this little move, just causing some extra trouble for his opponent. So his opponent decides to play rook d5. He says, well, I'll hold on to the c pawn. Capablanca says, really? pawn takes. What a clever idea in this position from Capablanca. He's completely confused the opponent. And this is going to be stunning to you. But in 5 more moves, black will resign. And let's unpack why. Because, first of all, if he captures on c5, put it in the comments below. Let's use first to put in the comments of what does white do? How does white win in this position? What's the story? White to play and win? This is a big deal. Put it in the comments below. So in this one, cannot take on that square on c5. And now we get this important moment where, in simple terms, the pawn goes to g6 because he wants to stop the queen capturing on that square. Well, now we use the passed pawn. And that's very instructive. Now we have a passed pawn where it is 2 squares away from promotion. Black must put something in front of it. He must blockade it. This is a great demonstration of the danger of a passed pawn. Aaron Nimzovich, in a very colorful way, wrote that a passed pawn is like a thief in the night. Mere observation will not do. You must place it under lock and key or risk it stealing your position away. And this is a wonderful demonstration from Aaron Nimzovich's team, because now the poor queen must blockade this dangerous pawn. So the king moves to g7. Okay, and how do we break through in this position? Well, Capablanca has a very simple theme. He says the queen is not the best blockader here. He's going to move the queen around onto b7, but first he wants to play a4. Why? Because in simple terms, he actually has a future plan. He's thinking about of trying to get this pawn up onto that one, gain all that space in the position. So he's also patient. And I think also Capablanca was quite smart, and he could pick up his opponent was going to play rook to d6. Now, this is very important. The pawn is blockaded. It can't advance. What are we going to do? How would you play? Take a big moment here. Shall we say this is a tactic alert? This is where we need to take note. Why? Well, number one, this pawn, if it was not for that queen, is going to run through. So we need to remove the queen. Number two, there is a check here. And this is a wonderful moment. Because what we do is we play queen e5 check. But the check seems useless. It does nothing. Because now they just push pawn f6 and chase us away. And then we see why. Put your rooks behind passed pawns. This is Tarash's rule. Not quite sure why Tarash got his name on it, because plenty of players have done it before that. But Dr. Tarash, as we've gone through some of his games, put the rook behind the passed pawn and look at the power of it. Queen takes d6. Spectacular. We destroy the rook. The queen must take, and off the pawn goes. Boom, resigns. And this is a spectacular demonstration of how you can win with a passed pawn. The power of that passed pawn. What a wonderful conversion. And this is so valuable for you in your games because your opponents are not going to have such great defensive skills. They'll understand the danger. I want you to see these big moments of how he took the outside majority. He made the passed pawn. And then he pushed that passed pawn, tying down the opponent's pieces. And that was deadly in this situation. Once that pawn structure was established, what a great job he did to change it up. Because when we get this moment of rook takes d4, we have now this outside majority 3 versus 2. That's a big deal. And then he progressively focused on what was important, which was control of the file, dominance of the file. And then this little moment where he didn't just take back on c5. He focused on the activity to mess up the opponent's structure. And then this turnabout where he got the passed pawn rolling and the opponent was in so much trouble because the queen is not a great blockader. Neither is a rook. But this is a wonderful theme. And then this trick of queen check and queen captures on d6. Remember this tactical pattern. It's very valuable. Rook behind the passed pawn and let it roll. So sign up for the notes, and then you can study this further. And you can also reference onto some of the other games that are out there that we've looked at on these wonderful themes. And join me in our next one, which is another wonderful win for Capablanca in the Logical Chess Series Move by Move.